Alright, once again we're on the 2.5 practice slash classwork slash homework, and looking at question 17 we have this information, GD, that's right here. We know that, we know that GD bisects angle CBE. So this angle is being bisected by GD, which means by definition of bisects, it cuts that into two congruent angles. So let's just start out once again with our given GD bisects angle CBE. Keep this color coordination going. That's our given. And I'm going to break that information down. We said by definition, and I'm going to say of angle bisector, because there are also segment bisectors, that angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. We know that GD is cutting angle CBE into two equal parts, and those two angles are angle 2 and angle 3. Okay, cool. So we know that angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. We need to figure out how to show that angle 3 and angle 1 are congruent, so then we can use the transitive property to say angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. Now, if you're looking at this, do you know these two are congruent? Okay. You should notice that when two lines cross, we'll just focus on these two lines, that they create vertical angles. Those are the angles opposite of each other. So I'm going to point out in this step, my third statement is going to be that angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles. Do you know the reason for me being able to state this? Vertical angles are something that we can assume from the diagram. Okay, now that we know angles 1 and 3 are vertical angles, and our reader knows that angles 1 and 3 are vertical angles, we can say that they're congruent. We know vertical angles are congruent because of the vertical angles postulate. Number 5. Notice if angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, but angle 3 is congruent to angle 2, we can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Do you know why we can say this? The transitive property of congruence. And I'm just going to write it like this. Keep it short. I'm going to draw the congruent symbol. Cool. Now, if you had already tried this problem, like we were working in class this week, trying out these proofs, and you wrote it a little differently, it doesn't mean you're wrong. Okay, we just need to make sure step by step we're formulating a logical sequence of statements and having the proper reason for them. So this is how my proof looks. Maybe yours might look a little bit different. The only time it needs to follow a particular path is when some of these are already filled out for you. Like if you had a problem that looked like this, let's erase this. Let's say this and this were gone. You would have to know specifically what would be filled out here and what would be filled out here. But if you're practicing this a lot, then you'll be able to figure those things out. Alright, let's look at this one now. I am going to, as this is a good practice, show on my diagram what I know is true. Angle V is congruent to angle YRX, so I'm going to put a single arc on these. And I also know angle Y, I'm going to change the size of this. Angle Y, I'm going to put a double arc, is congruent to TRV. Okay, so we can see which angles are congruent to which. I'm going to start out with my givens. I'm just going to write both of the givens in one. Number 2, I'm going to point out to the reader, to my audience, that angle TRV and angle YRX are vertical angles. How do I know this? I can assume it from the diagram. Okay. By the vertical angles postulate, what can we say? That those two angles are congruent. Now I'm actually going to do this transitive property in the 2 steps. So I know angle YRX is congruent to V, and I know angle YRX is congruent to angle TRV. So in this step I'm going to say by the transitive property of congruence that angle V is congruent to angle TRV. And then with my next step, I'm going to say that since angle TRV is congruent to Y and angle TRV is congruent to V, that I can say those two are congruent. Angle Y is congruent to angle V. Once again, by the transitive property of congruence. Cool. So the goal is for you to see how to get from your givens to your proved statement using the definitions and properties we've learned. Alright, have fun. Have a good weekend.